Welcome to AudioVerse Listening Library, where every word awakens the power within. You don't need massive action to change your life. You need momentum, because once progress begins to roll, it rarely stops. In this Chapter 9, The Power of Small Wins and Momentum, James Clear talked about how to build unstoppable progress. Change rarely happens in giant leaps. It unfolds through a quiet revolution of tiny improvements, repeated over time. James Clear calls this the 1% rule, the idea that a small improvement each day compounds into extraordinary transformation. But this principle is deeper than mathematics. It's a philosophy of momentum. Every habit, no matter how small, is a vote for the person you wish to become. At first, the progress is invisible, like the roots of a bamboo tree growing underground for years before breaking through the surface. But when the roots are deep, the rise is unstoppable. Think about how frustration often appears just before the breakthrough. We quit when results don't show up quickly, forgetting that early effort isn't wasted, it's stored. Every repetition builds internal strength, confidence, and consistency, the invisible foundations of lasting success. Momentum doesn't just grow from action, it's built by emotionally rewarding small wins. When the brain experiences success, even in a small form, it releases dopamine, a chemical of motivation and satisfaction. That's why crossing off a checklist, finishing one page, or showing up to the gym, even briefly, can ignite a self-reinforcing cycle. Success, satisfaction, repetition, identity reinforcement. Over time, this cycle becomes autopilot progress. You no longer chase results, you maintain rhythm. Small wins transform into self-trust, the belief that I can show up and I will. Thinking philosophically, great philosophers have always whispered the same truth in different tongues. What is done daily shapes destiny. Aristotle said excellence is not an act, but a habit. Zen masters teach that enlightenment is found in repetition with awareness. The moral is clear. Greatness is not built in grand moments, but in graceful consistency. Each repetition is a spiritual act, a declaration of alignment between intention and reality. And when that alignment becomes natural, discipline transforms into devotion. Moving on to scientific insight. The psychology of momentum relies on the dopamine feedback loop. Each small success activates a burst of pleasure in the brain, strengthening the neural pathways that produced it. This process, called reinforcement learning, makes the brain crave continuation. Moreover, neuroscientists have found that micro-progress, visible signs of advancement, increases intrinsic motivation far more than large delayed rewards. That's why streaks, progress bars, or daily habit trackers feel so addictive. They tap into our ancient wiring for visible progress. Imagine a potter shaping clay on a wheel. He doesn't sculpt perfection on the first try. He shapes, fails, reshapes, and polishes. Each spin of the wheel, each imperfect pot refines his touch. Now think of a modern creator, a woman learning to code, upload, or narrate. Each small upload, each improved recording, each refined title adds one invisible layer of mastery. At first, it feels repetitive, until one day, the skill compounds into clarity, quality, and confidence. In both cases, repetition is the path, not the prison. Linear thinkers burn out chasing big leaps. Compound thinkers quietly stack small actions, knowing that the curve of growth always looks flat until it bends upward sharply. In essence, the law of momentum is spiritual as much as it is scientific. It rewards patience, presence, and persistence. Each small act carries its own echo. Energy never disappears, it accumulates. The philosophy of small wins can sometimes be misunderstood as thinking too small. But true mastery lies in combining humility in the short term with vision in the long term. Tiny actions should never replace big dreams, they should bridge them. Momentum without direction leads to motion without meaning. That's why the secret formula is: vision gives direction, habits give velocity. In the next chapter, we'll explore how to keep that momentum alive even when motivation fades, by mastering the art of the environment and the system behind every lasting habit. If willpower fails you, redesign your world, because your surroundings can do what your strength alone cannot. Now we will listen to Atomic Habits, Chapter 10, The Environment of Success, Designing Habits That Stick, How to Make Good Habits Inevitable and Bad Habits Impossible. The world around you silently shapes who you become. Your environment is not just a background, it's an invisible architect, constantly designing your choices. We often believe discipline is the key to success, but James Clear reminds us, you do not rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your systems. And every system begins with environmental design. If you want to eat healthier, keep fruit in plain sight. If you want to write more, place your notebook where your eyes land every morning. The cues of your surroundings are the triggers of your behaviors. They whisper suggestions before thought even begins. That's why the most effective people don't just rely on willpower. They engineer the path. They make good choices easy, frictionless, and obvious. They also make bad habits invisible, inconvenient, or far away. Imagine a river flowing downhill. You don't control the water by fighting it. You guide it by shaping its banks. Likewise, you don't control your behavior by fighting temptation. You redirect it by reshaping your space. When you master your environment, success becomes your default setting, not an act of effort, but an outcome of design. Philosophically, ancient wisdom has always echoed this truth in subtle metaphors. Buddha said, "Your mind is a garden. Your thoughts are seeds. You can grow flowers or you can grow weeds." But few realize the soil of that garden is the environment. Stoic philosophers like Epictetus taught that virtue isn't built in isolation. It's shaped by the company and context one keeps. You become the reflection of your surroundings. As water takes the shape of its container, the mind molds itself to its conditions. Thus, changing your environment is not a sign of weakness. It is an act of wisdom. It's saying, I trust the design more than the struggle. Talking scientifically, modern behavioral science supports this ancient intuition. Researchers call it choice architecture, the art of arranging cues and options so that desired behaviors become automatic. Studies show that environmental cues are stronger predictors of behavior than motivation itself. For example, people eat more when food is visible, even when they're not hungry. They spend more when the credit card is within reach, even when they don't need to buy. This is why habit engineers recommend environmental anchors, visible signals that trigger the brain's reward and action centers. By reducing friction for good habits and increasing friction for bad ones, we essentially reprogram the autopilot of the subconscious mind. The musician's studio. A guitarist keeps his instrument on a stand beside the chair, not hidden in a case. The visibility invites practice. The environment whispers, play. The writer's corner. A writer clears her desk every night, leaving tomorrow's notes open beside a warm lamp. Each morning, the cue of the open notebook silently reignites the creative loop. The modern minimalist. Someone trying to reduce screen time removes social apps from the home screen. No cue, no trigger, and suddenly, discipline feels easier. Each example proves a single idea. The cue wins over the intention. In contrast, if one has motivation approach, in that case, it results in first mindset, then short bursts of progress, followed by exhaustion. Whereas with approach of environment-first design, consistent progress with minimal mental strain, guiding through design, flow, ease, and sustained momentum. But on other hand, motivation approach with forcing self-control results into resistance, frustration, relapse. The contrast reveals the paradox of modern productivity. The more we try to control our impulses, the more control slips away. But when we subtly reshape the landscape, the struggle disappears, and behavior flows naturally in the right direction. True mastery lies not in fighting your old self, but in making your future self inevitable. The environmental design philosophy is powerful but incomplete without awareness. A beautifully arranged space can support your habits, but it cannot create intention. Some people design endlessly, new planners, new setups, new perfect routines, but forget to begin. Thus, the system must serve the soul's purpose. Your environment can guide your energy, but it's your clarity that gives it direction. The formula is harmony, external design aligned with internal intention. In this episode of Atomic Habits, we explore one of the most powerful principles of all, how your environment shapes your destiny. Discover how small shifts in your surroundings can make good habits effortless and bad ones impossible. From ancient wisdom to neuroscience, learn how to design your world for automatic success. Chapters covered. Why motivation isn't enough. The secret power of environmental cues. Designing systems that support success. Real-world examples of habit design. How to make your future self inevitable. In the next chapter, we'll uncover the hidden power of identity, how true change begins not with what you do, but with who you believe you are. You do not rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your systems. What small change in your environment can make your next habit effortless? Drop it below in comments. Your idea might inspire someone else today. Stay tuned for Chapter 11, The Identity Shift, Becoming the Type of Person Who Never Misses Twice. Thank you